Hello there, everyone. If you're watching this video, then you are part of the TTOR army, an army that is building itself up one subscriber at a time. Before we get into the topic of today's video today, I'd like to remind you that at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Thursday, I will be doing a live show for the TTOR show, and the topic of the show will be a topic from a list of topics that Brett Keane gave to me a couple of days ago. Exactly which topic that is, well, you viewer will have to find out when we go live on Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can watch the live show on my Rumble channel, which you can see right here on the screen. You'll also be able to watch my show live on my X account, which you can also see right here on the screen. And after the show is done, I will be backing it up to various alt-tech channels of mine. And the most prominent one of those is my Quarter channel, which you can also see right here on the screen. Quarter, of course, is my own open source alt-tech alternative to YouTube that champions real freedom of speech while providing features and functionality that rival and sometimes surpass YouTube's. So with that in mind, I hope to see you at my show on Thursday, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, either on my Rumble channel or on my X account. And now that you know about that, let's get into the topic of today's video, which is answering the question of whether or not the flood of Noah was a global flood. Now, why did this even come up? The reason why we're going to be talking about whether or not the flood of Noah was a global flood is that recently the Christian X user Derek Beeler said the following. Today I learned Frank Turek is a liberal compromiser, apparently. At least this is the necessary implication of those who say only liberals reject the global flood interpretation. A woman named Sarah asked him, okay, you need to clarify. He what? And then Derek responded by saying, just taking things to their logical ends. I'm hearing from fools that if you don't hold to the global flood view, you are a liberal and a compromiser. Turek holds the local flood view, so by extension, he's a liberal and a compromiser by that logic. So we learn from this post and the follow-ups that Frank Turek apparently does not believe that the flood of Noah was global and that it was merely a local flood. I responded to Derek by saying, you don't need to be a liberal to compromise on the flood of Noah. You just need to place the majority opinion of fallible men on par with Scripture in terms of authority and reinterpret the Bible accordingly. William Lane Craig already admitted in 2013 that he and other old earth creationists do this. But beyond that, what about the flood of Noah? How can we know that it's a global flood? Well, the local flood theory has real problems with it, and so in response to Derek and in response to Frank Turek and every other old earth creationist who holds to the local flood theory regarding the flood of Noah, I want to turn your attention to this article by Michael Cole from June 2009 titled Noah's Ark, Truth or Myth? You scroll down into the article, you go to the section titled Objections to the Biblical Account, and you go to point number 3. The flood was only a local flood and not worldwide. Michael Cole says in response to that objection, which is what we're dealing with here, I see two major problems with the local flood theories. You cannot cover the highest mountains with water for several months if the flood was only regional, Genesis 7:20. Secondly, and even more significantly, is the covenant which God made after the flood. God promised, never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth, Genesis 9:11. If the flood of Noah was merely a local flood, then God would have broken that promise hundreds of times since then. Now you may be thinking to yourself, wait, does it really say in Genesis 7:20 that the floodwaters went over the highest mountains? And does it really say in Genesis 9 that God promised never again there would be a flood to destroy the earth? Well, let's go to those passages. In Genesis 7:17 through 23, we read the following about the flood. For 40 days the flood kept coming on the earth, and as the waters increased, they lifted the ark high above the earth. The waters rose and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. They rose greatly on the earth, and all the high mountains under the heavens were covered. The waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 15 cubits. Every living thing that moved on land perished. Birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swarm over the earth, and all mankind. Everything on dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils died. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. People and animals and the creatures that move along the ground, and the birds were wiped from the earth. Only Noah was left and those with him on the ark. So according to the flood account, it says that the flood waters rose on the earth and that all the mountains under the heavens were covered and that the waters were 15 cubits above the tops of the mountains. Whoa. There is no way that's a local flood, because there'd be nothing in a local flood scenario to stop water that goes that high from spreading out across everything. Very interesting indeed. Then you go to Genesis 9, 8 through 11. Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, I now establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, all those that came out of the ark with you, every living creature on earth. I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be destroyed by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. So, as we see from Genesis 7, the flood waters really did go 15 cubits over the tops of the tallest mountains on the earth, and we see God really did promise that he would never send a flood to destroy the earth. So not only do the scriptures actually say that, but as Michael points out, if the flood of Noah was merely a local flood, then what God was promising is that he would never send a local flood again, and he has broken that promise many times over if that is truly what he means by the flood of Noah being a local flood. But let's continue. Other problems include that a population as large as 1 billion would not likely be contained within a single valley that would be amenable to a local flooding. Besides, some people and animals would have simply gone to higher ground, as happens during local flooding today. Even if the world's human population was not widely spread, nothing would have kept the birds and all the animals confined within that local flood area. Genesis 7, 21 through 23 says that all creatures outside the ark who lived on the land were destroyed. I also object to the possibility of a local flood because God could have merely instructed Noah and his family, along with the animals to be saved, to migrate out of the area that would be flooded. And I agree, if it was just a local flood, then the ark was completely unnecessary, and God could have just told Noah and his family and anyone who listens to Noah to go to some other area outside where the flood would be. But no, the point of the ark is that God was going to flood the entire planet, not just one region. And the only way to survive this planet-wide flood that would wipe everything out was to build this ark and stay on it during the flood. Literally, the only thing that makes sense of the ark is a global flood. A local flood scenario that these older creationists promote completely negates the need for an ark. You don't need an ark to survive that flood. You just go to some other area on the planet. So aside from the fact that the local flood theories have problems, which we just discussed, and aside from the fact that the Bible clearly teaches that the flood of Noah was global in nature and not local or regional, what else causes me to believe that the flood of Noah was a global flood? Is there any physical, scientific evidence that the flood of Noah was global and really happened? I say yes to that. I have here on screen an article from Answers in Genesis titled High and Dry Sea Creatures by Dr. Andrew Snelling. And when you scroll down in this article, you go to a section called Marine Fossils High Above Sea Level. And in this paragraph we read, marine fossils are also found high in the Himalayas, the world's tallest mountain range, reaching up to 29,029 feet above sea level. For example, fossil ammonites, coiled marine cephalopods, are found in limestone beds in the Himalayas of Nepal. All geologists agree that ocean waters must have buried these marine fossils in these limestone beds. So how did these marine limestone beds get high up in the Himalayas? Now, the article goes on to say that the Himalayas used to be much lower, and that's how the Flood of Noah put the fossils there, and then God raised up the mountains to the height that they are now as part of the draining of the floodwaters. That is a theory that creationists have. But we don't even need to go with Snelling's theory here in this article to conclude that the flood of Noah could have easily put these limestone beds at the top of the Himalayas at their present height. Why do I think that? Back in 2014, Nature World News put out an article titled, "Vast Underwater Ocean Trapped Beneath Earth's Crust." The article reads, "Scientists have discovered evidence of a vast water reservoir trapped hundreds of miles beneath the surface, capable of filling Earth's oceans 3 times over. Located 400 miles beneath Earth's crust, this body of water is locked up in a blue mineral called ringwoodite that lies in the transition zone of hot rock between Earth's surface and core. Interestingly, this water is not in a form familiar to us. It's neither liquid, ice, nor vapor." Geophysicist Steve Jacobson from Northwestern University suggests it means that water on Earth may get pushed to the surface from below, contradicting previous beliefs that water was delivered via icy comets. Geological processes on the Earth's surface, such as earthquakes or erupting volcanoes, are an expression of what is going on inside the Earth, out of our sight, Jacobson, co-author of the paper published in the journal Science, said in a press release. "I think we are finally seeing evidence for a whole Earth water cycle which may help explain the vast amount of liquid water on the surface of our habitable planet. Scientists have been looking for this missing deep water for decades." Ringwoodite here is key. Its crystal-like structure makes it act like a sponge and draw in hydrogen and trap water. Jacobson and his colleagues based their findings on a study of the transition zone, an underground region extending across most of the interior of the United States. Along with Jacobson's lab experiments on rocks simulating the high pressures found deep underground, the study compiled data from the U.S. Array, a network of seismometers across the United States used to measure earthquake vibrations. It produced evidence that melting occurring 400 miles beneath the surface, plus the movement of rock in the transition zone, leads to a process where water can become fused and trapped within the rock. Scientists were astounded because most melting in the mantle was previously thought to occur at a much shallower distance, about 50 miles below the Earth's surface. And according to The Guardian, Jacobson said that this trapped hidden water may explain why Earth's oceans have stayed the same size for billions of years. If the stored water wasn't there, it would be on the surface of the Earth, and mountaintops would be the only land poking out, he said. So according to scientists who have studied the matter, 400 miles underneath the surface of the Earth is a whole body of water trapped in a blue mineral called ringwoodite, and the ringwoodite is keeping this water 400 miles underneath the surface of the Earth. If the ringwoodite were to disappear and all that water came to the surface of the Earth, there would be enough flood water flooding the surface of the Earth to the point where only the tops of mountains would be sticking out of the water, according to this Jacobson guy. Now, of course, this whole thing explains where the floodwaters went. Genesis 8, 1-5 says, "But God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and the livestock that were with him in the ark, and he sent a wind over the earth, and the waters receded. Now the springs of the deep and the floodgates of the heavens had been closed, and the rain had stopped falling from the sky. The water receded steadily from the earth. At the end of the 150 days the water had gone down, and on the 17th day of the 7th month the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. The waters continued to recede until the 10th month, and on the first day of the 10th month the tops of the mountains became visible." So, according to Genesis 8, when the flood was done, God caused the flood waters to recede below the surface of the earth, and it took a couple of months for the flood waters to recede to the point where the tops of the mountains became visible. So, this whole underwater network 400 miles underneath the surface of the Earth's crust that's being kept down there by this ringwoodite stuff, that is the water from the flood of Noah. That's where it went after it receded. It went down there, and God is using this ringwoodite, I believe, to keep that water down there so that the earth isn't flooded again like he did 4,400 years ago with the flood of Noah. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is not only why I do not believe in the local flood theories that people like Derek Beeler and Frank Turek hold to, and that's also why I believe 100% that the flood of Noah not only really happened, but was really a global flood. Hopefully, you found this video educational, and hopefully, it allows you to accept easier the biblical recording of the flood of Noah being a global flood that wiped out all life on earth that was not on the ark.